the league.
Alan, I got to bust up. Hang on a second. I got to start again. House in Baltimore and purple, which is why I'm wearing my purple. But I am wearing my Oriole hat, and we will give the Redskins fans the welcome they so richly deserve on Thursday when we get together for football. But this is a baseball segment. Alan McCallum is our longtime friend, analyst, insider for all things Orioles baseball, and he will be, by his very nature, up all night on all these weeknight trips out to Anaheim, Oakland, and Seattle. But strangely, Alan, we're not just up like touring next year with the Beckham trade as well as the Hellickson trade since the last time we got together about a month ago. The Orioles strangely showing some weird signs of life, even though they're not very good, right?
They're not very good, largely because of starting pitching. The reality, the starting pitching is all about what they did or didn't do over the course of the last few years, which is something I'm sure we'll get into in a little while. Part of what got them where they are is that they had key members of the bullpen injured or, frankly, ineffective at parts of the season, and that has largely been righted at this point. Darren O'Day still not Darren O'Day at this point, but and their offense hasn't been consistent all year, although it's showing the best stretch that it's had through the course of the season in the last 3 weeks or so. But they're not very good, and their starting pitching is the story of that tale. But they're in it. You asked me before the season started, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know I said that I thought they had a chance to compete, and the answer for how is largely because of the mediocrity of the rest of the league. And we have seen that. I mean, shy of the Houston Astros, who are suffering from injuries at this point, the rest of the league's pretty mediocre.
And the Yankees came back to earth again. I mean, and, the Red Sox probably got a 3 or 4 game losing streak in them sometime soon. Although, that's not really what we're looking at, but you do measure yourself against that, right?
You have to. That's what's kept them where they are as a club that has, I will certainly say from an offensive and bullpen standpoint, largely underachieved. Starting pitching is pretty much what it was slated to be. But they're in it. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're contenders. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they got a great shot to get in to the postseason. But they're in it. They're 5-2 on a homestand against, particularly against the Royals. The sweep of the Royals was an impressive feat. The stretch the Royals had been on, which was pretty impressive. They took a couple hits against the Tigers, but it's hard to argue with a 5-2 homestand. The problem is that they're so far behind at this point. You can't really stub your toe and recover because the clock. There's no clock in baseball, but the calendar, it plays the role of the clock in this, and the majority of the games in the season have been played already.
For you, with the pitching and where it is right now, obviously we all would have had Jimenez out of the rotation, Miley never in the rotation. Chris Tillman probably would have been out of my rotation a lot quicker than he was for Buck and for Dan Duquette. This moving around of the chairs on the Titanic, as I called it before the trading deadline, certainly Tillman, I don't know how much further they could go with him in this notion that somehow this idiocy that they're going to sign him for next year. Dude, this is Major League Baseball. This isn't the California Penal League. You know what I mean? We don't get bonbons here for being a nice guy. Your ERA's 8. You're not a Major League pitcher, period.
Well, you say that, but the other options in the rotation aren't what you call stellar either. It's a major indictment on the organization, on Dan Duquette, that of the pitchers that you have to take out of the rotation, Chris Tillman is the choice, and Ubaldo Jimenez and Wade Miley maintain. Now, obviously, it's that Tillman has been so completely crushed in the first innings, in the early innings of the games, that you completely take the team out of any opportunity to win these games. Ubaldo has suffered that, Miley has suffered that, but certainly not to the clip that Chris Tillman's been in. We talked about this before. He got hurt towards the end of last season. They knew that he wasn't quite right, and they knew in December that he was hurt. They held that back from people, and they did nothing to replace him, leaving Ubaldo Jimenez, the left-handed version of Ubaldo Jimenez and Wade Miley, as 2/5 of a rotation. Dylan Bundy, who shows great promise but had never pitched to any significant amount at any level, certainly not at the major leagues in terms of innings and being able to pile them up, and Kevin Gausman, who you're looking to be the great white hope, and it right now looks like a second-half pitcher. We saw that last year. We're starting to see it now. But that's just not how you build a rotation, Ness. It's just not. And so having Tillman be the guy, I mean, it's obviously the right choice. You only have one person you can take out. They really need to take out three. But that's a massive indictment on what didn't happen in the offseason.
He is Alan McCallum. He's covering all things baseball around here and has been with us for a couple of decades talking Orioles baseball. Now they go to Anaheim and a West Coast swing here that, look, let's be honest. They've been better at home than they've been on the road. They had all these home runs on Sunday and over the weekend, as sort of expected. The road has not been their friend. And as we've pointed out, a 7-3 here bounces them right back. A 3-7 on this road trip, which they've had a lot of that, over the course of their history in scuffles, as, every team goes west. Every team that plays on the road scuffles a little bit. This is a really pivotal time. And, as much as you look up for some of these other teams and see them at or a game or two below 500, that's kind of cute and clever in August, but that can't go on past Labor Day. I mean, at some point you have to break through the glass ceiling, as they say, and at least be a 500 team.
So one of the reasons they've been so bad on the road is the Camden Yards effect. We've talked about this a lot. I mean, they, for the last several years, have put together a team that swings at first pitches, strikes out a lot and hits a lot of home runs. And at Camden Yards, you can hit a mediocre fly ball and have it go out, and that constitutes a home run. And in most other ballparks, I mean, there's certainly, Yankee Stadium has right field, Fenway has the monster. I mean, there's certainly places where the ball flies, but in most other ballparks, you hit a home run, it's got to be legit. And one of the things that's hurt this team, certainly this year, and it would have hurt them more last year if it hadn't been for Manny Machado and Mark Trumbo having an MVP-like season for himself, is their inability to have good at-bats and hit the ball where it's pitched and drive it to the opposite field. Now, what has been, and I know there's a lot of home runs over the weekend, but what has been really impressive over the last 3 weeks is that we've seen this team, maybe you call it the Trey Mancini effect, start to hit the ball to right field for a lot of right-handed power hitters. To the ability to go oppo, the ability to take some pitches and have better at bats. I mean, we've certainly seen Manny Machado for the first time all year, which was looking like an absolute embarrassment of a season for himself. He's risen his batting average to almost 40 points in the last month by looking much more like the hitter we saw in 2013 when he was slashing doubles, hitting the ball the other way. We saw Adam Jones for about a 10-day stretch really put together a good March once he got into the leadoff spot. And then there's another thing. I mean, and this is I think it's an indictment on Buck. I mean, people say Buck is loyal to his players, and that's absolutely true, but Buck is slow to move. Buck is slow to say, I can't put Mark Trumbo and Chris Davis in the 3 and 4 spot for this team because hitting home runs. The ability to hit home runs does not make you a quality 3-4 hitter. And I know he's continuing to put Chris Davis there, and I assume when Trumbo comes back, he may do that again. But this team's offense has really gotten going when he put Jonathan Scope in the number 3 spot, moved Manny Machado back down to 2, and even right now, as we're seeing Trey Mancini lift himself into the middle of this lineup and push some other guys further down, that's when this offense has really started to get going. I say that all to say that if they go out on the road and go out on the West Coast and continue that approach, using the opposite field, hitting we've seen them hit a lot of doubles, and I certainly don't want to forget Tim Beckham. Tim Beckham's had a miraculous first week with the Baltimore Orioles, and he's certainly offensively been really impactful. If they can continue that MO going out on the West Coast, then you certainly want the starting pitching to come up and be strong. That is certainly going to be part of the formula, but scoring runs is going to be about how the approaches that they have at the plate. And this team needs to be different than it's been the last few years. In a season when home runs are flying out at record pace for most clubs, that has not happened for the Orioles. I mean, they're certainly hitting them, but they're not hitting them at the rate they used to. So they need these hitters to be productive in a way that fits for the road, that's going to fit in Oakland, which is a cavernous ballpark with huge amounts of foul territory, in Anaheim, which is a fair park, and Seattle, which is a cavernous ballpark where hitters' careers have gone to die. They need to have a different approach or certainly continue what they've been doing since the All-Star break, which is something we have not consistently seen this team do in ages.
Alan McCallum joining us here, talking all things Oriole baseball. Alan, I know it's a little revisionist history here because we talk about Beckham's first week and Hellickson with a decent start and whatnot. Where were you? Because we didn't talk, during my little breakout on the West Coast. I got back. It was right up against the trading deadline. I never sort of, got your temperature on it leading up to it. I think we were all sell, sell, sell. Look, I mean, the old man needs to sell tickets. He wants to stay in. He wants to keep Machado around. He might not be here in 2019 and 20 and 21 like you and I, so I don't know that they're in the market to be buying green bananas at this point. But that being said, they had an opportunity, and I know that, Duquette had said, well, position players weren't bringing in the value. It was all about arms. Well, they had arms, too, and they didn't get rid of any of those. And they may wind up in the end making a run at this thing, and they may wind up 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, being involved. I wouldn't have bet on it. And at this point, they're on borrowed time, and this is time that the credit card will pay 2 seasons, 3 seasons from now when they didn't cut bait, because I don't think they're winning the World Series, even if they make this a little bit of fun.
I'm really happy you asked me this question, Ness. And I'm happy that you're asking me in this moment where, after taking that gamble, they had a positive homestand. People are excited. What I feel about it, and honestly, the answer is this: can this team make the postseason, meaning the wild card game? Sure. Can this team play well through late August and September to give some legitimacy to what has really been a dysfunctional season for the major league team, Baltimore Orioles? Sure. And people will get excited, and it'll look like it paid off. But I'm telling you right now, emphatically, that the choice to stay in this moment was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. If it was Peter Angelos dipping his hand in and saying, we're going to ride this thing out, then he just simply knows nothing about baseball. If it's Dan Duquette who made that choice, then he, as a steward of a major league team, is an embarrassment. And I say that because we've talked about this before. General manager's job is twofold. A manager's job is to take what he's been given and get the most out of whatever he has on the field. That's his job. It's relatively one-dimensional in that way. Not one-dimensional in the sense that you have to sort of plan for the war and not the battle, and that's a good manager will do that. General manager's job is twofold. General manager has to put a product on the field that is worthy, unless you've sort of gone all in for years and then you have to blow it up or start to rebuild. But the other part of his job, the second and maybe the most important, is the long term. Building for the long term to figure out, how can I keep this thing going? If you're the Giants in San Francisco and you've won 3 World Series out of the last 8, I guess at this point, hey, you get a pass. But if you're the Orioles and you had 14 losing seasons, I get that. And every time you are legitimate from that going forward is important. I understand that too. But the window on this team ends completely in 2018. Period. I'm not saying everybody's going to be gone, but Nobody knows what's going to happen with Manny Machado, and the expectation is that they're not going to resign him because they don't spend that kind of money. Nobody knows what's going to happen with Zach Britton, but the expectation is that he's going to be gone because I can't imagine they're going to show, even if they do something miraculous and sign Manny Machado, the likelihood that they would spend that kind of money on a one-inning reliever, even if he's the best in the game, is, I cannot fathom that. You've got, in 2018, at this point, Kevin Gausman and Dylan Bundy, who you would say are penciled in to be in the rotation. And Dylan Bundy, if they have to nurse him every 6 days to get 6 or 7 innings and hope that he can build up his strength, that's scary. And nobody knows what Kevin Gausman is at this point, except he seems to have good second halves. As you pointed out, why would anyone consider signing Chris Tillman at this point unless he comes back for the minimum? Wade Miley's going to be, Ubaldo Jimenez is going to be a free agent, and if they bring him back, I think that people will storm Camden Yards. And anything you can do to make sure Wade Miley's not in this rotation next year, you do it. So you've got 2 potential guys who you don't know what you're going to get out of in the rotation. You've got an organization that has historically not spent money on starting pitching, which I can't tell you I disagree with, because aside from a guy like Max Scherzer, all you have to do is go and look at the history of long-term 7-year, $150, $200 million deals, and it's foolish to do it. And every time they have international money, they give it away.
The international money thing is just, it's mind-blowing, right?
It's insane. So you certainly have to question their scouting department. Well,
the nice people call it unorthodox. Unusual.
So you've got a team that's going nowhere fast, that is on the periphery of a I guess you'd call contention, which is exactly where they are right now. And you say we're going to be in this because the epitaph has not been yet written for the 2017 Baltimore Orioles. When you've got, and I don't care what anybody says, they didn't get what they wanted out of that from offers from Zach Britton, then they were asking for too much. Because when you have multiple teams battling to get a key person, you're going to get something. And for an organization that does have some prospects, particularly some offensive prospects, I don't begrudge them that. But every time they have a decent starting pitcher, they give them. When you're talking about an organization that in 2013, when they were marginal, when they came into the season undermanned, and they were marginally in contention, and they gave away Jake Arrieta to get Scott Feldman, who they were never going to keep, who was as mediocre, if you can call him that, as any pitcher that's ever existed. And then in 2015, when they were nowhere near contention, and they stayed in it, and they gave up Zach Davies for a player that they made no attempt to keep as an outfielder. And now you come into 2017, and the majority of your rotation has an ERA not 4, not 5, but high 5s and 6s and 7s and 8s.
And you're still in the race, and it's August. It's really, it's kind of incredible that they haven't beaten the cover off the ball to get to this point, but they really haven't, right?
They haven't. What I'm telling you is that, yes, they could get to the postseason this year, which is an incredible thing to say. But there is no possibility, none, that this team can win the World Series. There's no, unless everybody in the rotation breaks an arm and they bring up young guys that have gold dust sprinkled over them and can magically do something for 6 weeks that no one has ever seen in the game ever. This team has no possibility of winning the World Series. And if you're weighing, well, we're just going to try and get there and see what happens, as opposed to, in 2018, we have no plan. We're not going to spend money. We don't have any young arms on the coming up. And 2 of the key players that make 2017 and 2018 viable are likely gone at the end of next year, when we have no rotation to make this viable coming into the season. That's insane, Nestor. It's just patently insane. And it's poor stewardship of an organization that has already been through so many travails. Do I want them to get to the postseason at this point? Well, of course. And why not? I mean, there's really nothing else to look forward to. Yes, they could pass guys through waivers, and I guess they could make a trade late. But after this road trip, if they're going to do it, if it's a failure, they're going to need to figure out something. But Trumbo, Britton, they got rid of Kim, which to me, I've never seen a player more mishandled or more mistreated than Kim, and that's another story for another day, I guess. O'Day or Brock, I would have kept one of the three, but if you could have gotten something for Britton, if you could have gotten something for O'Day, and I know O'Day's not at his best at this point, Seth Smith, Wellington Castillo, if nothing more than to move some of the money off the books, if nothing more than to create space to change the quality of the lineup going into 2018, and I will stress again, as much as they're going on a stretch right now that looks impressive, they need to change the offensive outlook and approach of this team. They can't continue to do Trumbo and Chris Davis and even Adam Jones. They've
added Beckham, who's going to strike out 200 times if you bat him enough, right?
Well, I mean, look, Tim Beckham. I like if you're asking. I like Jeremy Hellickson. Okay, I mean, I wanted them to get him last year, but I mean, what are the odds that they're going to sign him? I mean, if you're Jeremy Hellickson,
well, somebody gave him $17 million last year. You got to be happy that's not you. I mean, you've already got your issues with Jimenez. He's not a $17 million pitcher.
Not anymore. I mean, if you're Jeremy Hellickson, would you stay in Camden Yards to pitch?
No,
I mean,
no pitcher will. No pitcher will. No pitcher ever has.
I mean, it's
Sidney
likely
Ponsone's the only guy that signed here, and literally.
It's likely that he's gone. And as much as you can like Tim Beckham's bat, and I respect the idea that, hey, this guy's a first-round pick that might be coming into his own, that might be true. But shortstop is a defensive position. And, you know, there's been a lot of debate about should J.J. get his spot back. And the reality is, even with a little less range, J.J. Hardy is one of the best defensive shortstops out there because his glove is as sound as anybody's in the major leagues. This is likely his last year. So, I mean, I hope that they have Tim Beckham out fielding ground balls 150 times an hour over the next few weeks. And maybe you decide you go a little less defensively on the infield because you still have Scope and you still have Machado and Davis, and you can live with some of that if he can give you some offense in the coming season. So, I mean, if you're going to go that way, Hellickson and Beckham, fine. I mean, they're certainly as good an option as anybody else he would have found out there for what they had to offer. But they gave up another young pitcher, right? I mean, the Tampa Bay Rays, I certainly trust their scouting a lot more than the Orioles as far as pitching. And whether it's Arrieta or Parker Bridwell or
I was going to bring up Bridwell because you're going to see him this week. So that was where I was going with this because we're going to see him, and that's going to anger up the blood. I mean, dude had a 5.5 ERA at Bowie. I don't know what that means when the Arrietas and the Davises and this kid leave and they suddenly can figure it out somewhere else. I mean, I think that's all of our worst nightmares for Bundy and Gausman, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I mean, you have to question what the Orioles organization, their scouting and development department in terms of pitching. People can say all they want, oh, well, Jake Arrieta needed to go somewhere else to figure it out. It wasn't like it took a year and a half for Jake Arrieta to be something different, Nestor. He went to Chicago and was immediately different. That's an indictment on an organization. That they couldn't recognize that Zach Davies had some talent and gave him up for an outfielder that they were never going to sign. That as great a year as Parra was having, he'd been a backup outfielder basically until he won a Gold Glove. Was never known for his bat. He's turned into a nice player, but they were never going to keep him. So I mean, weighing cost, and looking long term has to be part of a general manager's job. I will say again, if it was Peter Angelos who decided that they were all in, then he just simply doesn't understand the reality of his sport. And if it was the general manager, then it was an embarrassment. I say that with them playing well. I say that with them having a chance to get to the postseason. The weight of the risk was not sound. It was not a good decision. And even if they get to the postseason, and hey, if they get to, the only thing that would make that decision a good one
is a chance to play one ball game in October, just one, right?
No, I disagree. Is if they go on a magic carpet ride and get into the World Series. Now, I won't even go as far as to say win it, but if they go on some magic carpet ride and get into the World Series, then I will take back everything I just said. But the long-term implications for what has happened here in the last few weeks is that they go into 2018, the last truly viable season for the essential core of this group.
Everyone's lame duck then.
With 2/5 of a rotation that you are unsure of, a shortstop who, while talented offensively, you have to worry about his glove a little bit, an outfield that is uncertain, except for that they're going to put Trey Mancini out there, I assume, because first base and DH will be pretty much covered.
And by the way, Adam Jones probably isn't a center fielder much longer, right?
Yeah, I think Adam Jones is probably going to be the right fielder on this team pretty soon. And that's okay. I mean, he's had a good run, and they've got a couple guys in the minor leagues that they think are about ready to take that over. So, I mean, again, part of the reason you make moves like this, and the Orioles have been awful about this, we've talked about this before, is about, do you believe in your organization being able to develop players? And if you believe in that, you have to let some guys go so that you can make room for the players that are going to come up. And every indication that in terms of how they've moved has been, well, we don't really believe in these guys. I mean, they clearly didn't believe in Trey Mancini to become the player that it looked like he had a chance to be. And so far, knock on wood, he's proven them wrong. But you've got to create room for players to come up. You've got to create room for your roster to get cheaper, so that you identify, hey, Manny Machado, and I told you a few months ago, I wouldn't give him the money. But if you decide he's our guy, he's one of the best third basemen that's ever been seen in the game, which is absolutely true. And whatever you think about his makeup and his big brain farts on the bases and his I want to hit a home run every time I come up stretches that he goes into, this year it happened for 3 months, he's the guy we want to build around, fine. You identify those sort of once-in-a-generation players and you pay them, and then you have to move other players in and out so that your organization and your contracts don't become so top-heavy, particularly in what they would describe as a mid-market, that you can function, and so that you can continue to be fluid and be smart. And they had opportunities to move players and try to find pitching, starting pitching, and maybe a position player or two if they'd made some sound moves in this trade deadline extravaganza. We're going to see what happens. I think that they've made some extremely poor choices, but at this point, you absolutely should root for them to get to the postseason because nothing else would make what they did legitimate.
Last thing for you, signing Scope. Thoughts?
Get him in a room and get his name on a piece of paper as fast as you possibly can.
Well, we're out watching Trout run around for $34 million a year the next couple of years, right? I mean, I don't know what the number is on Scope, but he has earned himself a lot of money this summer, right?
Jonathan Scope, you've watched. The thing about Manny Machado is that his peak seemed to come a few years ago. Jonathan, and that's not the way it should be if you're a generational player. I don't know that Jonathan Scope is a generational player, but I know this. Every season that Jonathan Scope has stepped on the field, he's gotten better. Offensively, defensively. I mean, his arm at second base has few peers in the game. People will argue that his range isn't great, but he makes every play he's supposed to make. And he is developing into a middle-of-the-lineup force. And for a second baseman to hit the ball as long, as far as he does, and now he's developing the ability to that Eddie Murray presence, and maybe that's unfair to put that on him at this point in his career, but that ability to I'm gonna place the ball, whether it's a home run over the fence or that fly ball, that sort of looper over the second baseman. I'm going to put the bat on the ball and put it in play and get this run in. And aside from Trey Mancini, Chris Davis doesn't have that. Mark Trumbo doesn't have that. Manny Machado doesn't have that. And Adam Jones doesn't have that. And we've seen Jonathan Scope come up with some big hits for this organization before this season, and we're watching sort of a man-child to grow into a man at the plate. Is he going to continue to go up? I mean, who knows? But watching him over the first few years of his career have been exactly what you hope to see out of an organizational player who has all the talent in the world, and just a question of will he fulfill it or not. And at this point, I don't know how you couldn't say he's done anything but exceed expectations. So if they can get him signed on the dotted line, you do it. And I also say this, I mean, it's before he gets too expensive, although he's already going to get a pretty hefty payday. And it's probably childish to think this, but if Manny and Jonathan, being the friends that they are, if you get John Scope to sign here, maybe that gives you a little extra incentive for Manny to come back. I mean, money is going to be the ultimate key for that, I'm sure, but
ain't going to be no home down discount, though. We're all, keenly aware of that, nor should there be for Scope, I would think. I mean, he wants to get paid, too. Alan, it's always great to catch up with you, man. I know we didn't talk during the trading deadline, but we are into the heart of summer, and it's always good to talk a little baseball, get your insights. And you and I feel similarly that this may be a little bit of fun for the near short term, but the long-term ramifications of standing pat and dealing further in, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
It was a mistake. Let's hope that the fool's gold they're running on pays off in a way that none of us, I think, would ultimately expect. Maybe something magical, truly magical, will happen, but I wouldn't take that to Vegas.
You can always find him, Alan, at WNST.net. You can find me out in the Bay at Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. The morning newspaper comes to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. You can find me if you're going to London. We're throwing a big party on this Saturday before the big game in Wembley. We'd love to have your face in the place with us over in East London. I'm also out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and for Oriole fans, Chapter 9, 10, and 11 this week for the Peter Principles, including chapters on Albert Bell, Sid Thrift, and, of course, Mike Messina. You remember him. He'll be here for the 25th anniversary of Camden Yards opening up for the Hall of Fame luncheon next week. And I've got the story of letting the moose loose in the Peter Principles. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.